At 11, I was listed as most wanted, suspected of aiding and abetting another wanted suspect, my father, of purposely having a broken taillight. I watched sheriffs, guns drawn, sirens blaring draw near our vehicle. I was the second most dangerous specimen alive, only to that of a black man. Emmett Till was 14 when he was convicted by association, his skin a criminal, wanted more dead than alive. He, like many black men, were caught black-handed. My brother was 18 when I realized he was a fugitive. Begged a good man to be cautious, keep your hood off outside. Be wary of your speed when driving, let him know this is not a take-a-ticket system. You have seen how quickly they mistake wallet for pistol, waitlist for hitlist. I will not tell mom to give you an open casket. The FBI will still be out for your arrest, and I will not let them touch you, so tie up your white sneakers, get rid of that black shirt, exchange it for all white so you do not die a black boy, but a boy. Our skin is already funeral attire. And I want you to know what it's like to live.
Hello, and welcome to a conversation with Earlie Hudnall Jr. We have just heard a poem beautifully written and performed by Madison Pettaway, Houston's 2020 Youth Poet Laureate. Thank you, Madison, for kicking off tonight's event with that powerful message. This evening's program features Emmy Award-winning broadcast journalist Linda Lorelle in conversation with Houston's own Earlie Hudnall Jr., whose iconic photography has captured images of everyday life in Black communities throughout the South. Earlie, who also photographed Nelson Mandela during his visit to Houston in the early 1990s, will share his masterful take on finding inspiration and humanity in his moving images. You can find Earlie's work in the Smithsonian, Museum of Fine Arts Houston, in private collections across the world, and on view now through January 3rd, 2021 at Holocaust Museum Houston. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Linda Lorelle and Earlie Hudnall Jr.
Earlie, it's a pleasure to have an opportunity to talk to you about your incredible body of work. I'd like to start by talking about Nelson Mandela when he visited TSU to get his honorary degree, and you had the, I'm sure, great pleasure and honor of shooting the photographs. So what was that experience like for you in a general sense?
Well, it was a momentous experience from the standpoint of view that here was a great man that I had an opportunity to photograph. But my main job was to cover the commencement exercise. He was getting an honorary degree, and as a photographer, you're always visual, looking to capture the pulse of the event itself. And Mandela was the center of the event. And so as following the exercise was something commonly and normally that I always do all the time. Mm-hmm. So for me, it was another assignment, but it was an exciting one. But I never really thought about it, that I'm photographing a man of this stature, a famous person, or one that we have heard about and seen on TV and so forth.
And someone who means so much to the world, really, his legacy. And one of the things that I love, this particular photograph, where you can see the people who are in the crowd engaging with him. Tell me about this photo.
Well, as he came into the arena, the students was lined up. They were there, they were joyful, and a few of them that was up front had an opportunity to have their picture made with him. And as a photographer, you try to put yourself in a position to be able to get the best shot. So that's an instinctive kind of thing that you always strive to do. And so this was my job, and it was an opportunity for me to capture the image of him with the students to show the crowd being joyful in order, seeing him.
And the look of joy on his face as well is just breathtaking. When you think about what he meant to the world and the end of apartheid. And then you juxtapose that with where we are in this country, in the US right now, with so much racial unrest and so many difficult conversations that are being had around humanity. Your photographs speak to our common humanity. Talk to me a little bit about your work within the context of having shot Mandela and then still shooting today and seeing where we are as a world.
Well, it all started back in Hattiesburg, Mississippi. My grandmother was a storyteller, and she would tell us stories of how things were when she was a girl growing up, in the country and so forth. At an early age, I began to understand the importance of documenting one's community. But there was two incidents. She kept a photo album, and in this photo album, she had two newspaper clippings. One was of Jesse L. Brown, the first Navy flyer, African-American Navy flyer that was shot down over Korea. I knew his family. I knew his daughter, and that clipping was there. But there was another one. In Poplarville, Mississippi, Negro man pulled out of jail and lynched Minister Diggs' grave. That has always stuck with me. At that time, I began to understand the importance of documenting one's community. My father was an amateur photographer who made pictures of us on Sundays and special holidays. And I saw the pictures that he made while I was in military service. And I was able to refer back to there. So not knowing that I would become a photographer, this has always been in the back of my mind. And I always refer back to those two incidents as an inspiration for what I call an enduring spirit of African Americans. Mm-hmm.
So when you heard the horrific circumstances surrounding George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and countless others in recent history, do those instances take you back to that time and help make you reflect on all of the photographs that you've taken through the years?
I can remember the death of Emmett Till, and my mother was telling us, I have three brothers and two sisters, and she was telling us about whistling at people and how to mind ourselves and how to be cautious when we go out and so forth. And we lived in a tight-knit community, whereas we very seldom ventured out of there and so forth. But coming back to George Floyd, sure, my mind just ran back for a number of years through a number of incidents. I thought about Mickey Leland, the protest against South African Airways when it wasn't popular to protest against that. And the thing with George Floyd, people would ask me, say, Earlie, say, Hudnall, I know you're going to the protest. I said, no, I'm not going. Are you not going to go and make any pictures? I said, no. I said, I'm going to CUNY Homes, where he grew up at. I said, I'm going to the wall and photograph the people who come to see the mural. And this is where I spent my time. I spent my time in a community where I have photographed for a number of years. I thought that it was important for me to be there to support the pulse of the community and to capture that aspect of it from that standpoint of view. You had people who marched in the parade, and I assume some of them were there just because they had seen the March on Washington, they had seen the Million Man March, they had seen what happened in Selma, and they wanted to be a part of history. And so after the march is over, I assume that some of them took their signs, put them into the garage, and went on back to being themselves, doing whatever they wanted to do. But the reality of it, the people within the Third Ward area where Floyd grew up at, the people in his immediate community where I photographed across the street from Texas Southern University, I thought that it was important that I be there. And this is where I spent my time.
And what do you remember about those photographs that you took in the immediate aftermath of all of that?
Well, there's a wall that is there. And the wall has names. And the young lady told me, she said, everybody on this wall died some way. And they had Floyd's name there. And then they had, if I'm correct, there's an angel, the Black Death angel, angel of death, that is there. And I photographed that and so forth. And I was very lucky. One of the guys that I did not know at the time, who was a part of the, in New York, what was the incident? And it's slipping my mind, the 5 guys that went to prison.
Oh, the Central Park Five.
Central Park 5.
Yes.
One of those, no, one of the guys was there. And I did not know that. Someone was at my house just a few days ago. And they said, this is one of the Central Park 5. And I didn't know that. But to me, it just was so ironic that I was there at a precise time to capture a certain part of history that would be passed on. To me, that is what is so important. That takes me back to the stories that my grandmother would tell when she would sit on the porch with her Garrett sniff and sit there and laugh and then talk. And then she would tell her story. And it was so vivid. I mean, the vividness of it.
You know, that the power of storytelling is, it's everything. I mean, it is the common thread that connects us to our humanity. And, you know, we're sitting in the Holocaust Museum, Houston, as we do this interview. And the powerful stories that this museum shares with the world to make sure that what happened to over 6 million Jews is never forgotten.
Of course.
And so as we you know, talk about how we come together as a human race, and the power of story, the power of photograph, and being able to tell those stories, what gives you hope? Because I feel hopeful in this moment. I feel hopeful in spite of all of the chaos that is surrounding us. To me, these walls are a place of hope, and your photographs, to me, emit hope. What are your thoughts?
Well, my intent always is to capture the universality of the human spirit, what we do and how we live from day to day. And the commonality among people are the same wherever you go. And for me, this is why wherever I go, I like to get off the beaten path. I like to see how people live. I like to see how they interact with family, how they laugh, how they cry. We all share the same kind of pain. We laugh the same way. We cry the same way. I mean, that's a common language among us, our compassion and so forth. So it's up to the viewer to come to his own conclusion when he looks at my photograph. I hope that they really wrench one's soul, that reach into the gut and make one think based upon his personal experiences. This is how he identified. For me, my job is to put it out there so that people can actually see it. Then they can react to it. But if you look at my work, it's very compassionate. It's very respectful. I was always taught to respect people and so forth. And so I really don't approach my subjects with a preconceived idea or whatever, however. I look at it as a gift from humanity and an opportunity that for me to have the privilege of making that photograph. And so I give my subjects the utmost respect.
Well, let's take a look at some of those photos. This one of these beautiful, beautiful Black boys. Tell me about this.
Well, the photograph is called Wheels. The reason why it's called Wheels is because as young boys, you're free during the summertime. You can be whatever. You can be Superman, you can be Batman, you can fly, you can roll, and you have the freedom to venture out through the neighborhood and do whatever you want to do during the summertime, play ball, shoot marbles, and all of those things. And so really they are archetypes from my childhood. When I first saw the little boys, they were sitting at the bottom of the steps playing with a typewriter.
Really?
Yeah, and I was walking through the community. Their mother was sitting on the porch. And as I approached, I saw them. And I never asked my subject, may I take a picture? I looked at the mother and I nodded. And she looked at me, and I looked at the little boys there. So I kneeled down, and I slowly raised my camera, and I focused and click it. And then they said, "Hey, mister, take this one for us." And then they turned, and they picked up one and had him across the lap. And then they got on the ground, and they all turned that particular way and looked up at me. And I showed that picture to John Biggers. And he said, "Hey, man, that's wheels." I said, "Wheels?" He said, "Yeah, man, they roll during the summertime, don't they?" And then it dawned on me, the freedom of summer. A little boys out of school, how we run and we play, barefooted, rolling tires, playing go-karts and so forth and on. And so
And
this
then
is
the joy, the pure joy and
Sure.
innocence on their faces is
Sure.
just precious.
and then they're completely free.
Completely,
Mhm.
completely free.
Right.
So this is, I love this. Where was this one shot? And he's
This
just
one was
seriously
shot-
cooling off in the Houston heat.
That photograph is called Cooling Down. And it's shot over in the CUNY Homes on the front side of Blodgett Street there. And I'm sorry, on Cleburne. And it reminds me of during the summertime back home. We would get in the backyard in the afternoon and take the hose pipe and have a water fight, my brothers and I and so forth. And so this little guy, he was there cooling down with the hose pipe during the summertime.
Yeah, we can all relate to that. This beautiful, proud, statuesque woman. If I remember correctly, this was at the funeral of
Judson Robinson.
Judson Robinson.
Uh-huh.
Yes, I remember him so well. Judson Robinson Jr.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, so tell me about this photograph.
Well, the funeral was over. The procession had exited the church and come down the steps. And this lady was standing there, so regal. And she was looking off into the distance. And I saw her. And I just raised my camera and actually made the photograph. But it took me back to my grandmother, my mother, and the women of the church. My grandmother was a day worker. She worked for Merle and Claude Williams for $3.50 a day. And so she rode the bus and she talked about Dr. William and Mrs. William. And then she talked about the son Claude and the daughter Lynn. But on Sundays, wow, special holidays, Easter Sundays and so forth and on, they would put on those crowns and go to church and their hats. And I can remember her talking about, "I put this hat on layaway and I should be able to get it out in time for Easter." And layaway back in that days was a thing. There wasn't a thing such as credit cards and money and so forth. So you put it on layaway. And believe it or not, the merchant would take it off the shelf, wrap it up, and put it away for you. So it was actually laid away. And so the book that came out was Crowns. So this is my crown in a way. And Lady in Black Hat with Feathers, and I thought that it was very significant.
And so representative of the strong Black women throughout our history that have kept our families together.
That is so very true.
So, Congressman Mickey Leland, where was this shot? What were the circumstances?
This is shot in the Galleria area, close to South African Airways, their main office, which was there on the Southwest Freeway, directly across from the Galleria. I first met Mickey Leland was at a protest on campus with his beard and his hair up and everything. And so at that time, Mickey was there. But Mickey was very passionate. He was a very passionate individual. And he believed in the cause that he more or less took up. And one of them was against apartheid, against South African Airways. And so for me, on the weekends after work, I would follow. I would go and shoot the demonstrations as best I could. I would follow fire trucks and so forth. So this particular day, he was out and they had this big protest against South African Airways. And so I was there and was able to make that particular photograph. Mm-hmm.
And this one, of course, is Mr. Shine, probably one of your most famous photographs. And he just looks like someone you want to walk up to and just have a conversation with. And he looks like his spirit is is so effervescent that he just loves life. Tell me about Mr. Shine.
Well, Mr. Shine, I used to work for the Informer newspaper, Mr. George McElroy.
Yes.
And Mr. Mack used to send me on assignments. So one day I had returned, and under the canopy where the office were at there, this man was standing there, and the sunlight, it was afternoon, and it was just perfect sunlight. And he was there, and I looked up and I saw him, and I kind of winked, and he looked back, and I raised my camera slowly, and he began to look into the distance and smile. And that's how it came back with Mr. Shine. And again, I didn't have a title for it, but John Biggers was my mentor. And I went over to see Papa John, I would call him. And he was laying on the sofa one day, and I said, John, I said, look at this photograph. He said, hey, boy, that's Mr. Shine. I said, Mr. Shine? He said, he's like the sun. I said, okay. And so that's how Mr. Shine came about.
Love it. What a beautiful story. And this precious baby girl is on one of the invitations for the Holocaust Museum event that's coming up. Tell me about her. She's beautiful.
Well, the Desert Storm Parade downtown.
Oh, yes.
A lot of the kids went to the parade. The parade was just about, it was over. And I had shot a number of pictures, a lot of them. And this little girl with another friend of hers was sitting on the sidewalk. And I was standing over her shoulder, and she was there. And she kind of looked up and looked away, and I was able to make the picture of her. Now, the unique thing about my photographs, I never, very seldom, ask people to pose. Yeah, I think that it interferes with the spirit connection between you. When you see people, you have to have the sensitivity of feeling that the moment is just right. And it's not that you are taking something, but you are making a photograph. And they become archetypes of the community.
You're
They
reflecting
become,
what you
sure,
see. You're not
right.
orchestrating
And they are
it.
truly archetypes from my childhood. The things that I see, the things that I enjoy, and so forth. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, you know, let freedom ring. That's such a beautiful photograph for an event of that name. So I want to come back to the whole freedom concept, and I want to ask you again about Mr. Mandela's photographs that you took, and not only the ones that you took here, but you eventually went to South Africa and you shot the cell in which he lived for so many years of his life. What was that like for you to shoot this photograph?
Well, it was kind of surreal to be able to try to understand the spirit of an individual, how what he believes in can't be broken. But Mandela spent 20 plus years in that cell, on that bed, in the yard where he was at, total isolation. So it gives the mind, you have to have a strong constitution as to how you can survive. Something within you allows you to believe in what you are doing. You have to believe in the spirit. You have to believe that there's a higher being that is guiding you. And so to see that cell and to try to understand it, it was difficult, but it was something that I couldn't necessarily identify with. I didn't feel that I could survive it, even though I was in the Marine Corps and I served in Vietnam. And I served in close quarters and lived in foxholes and done those kinds of things, but to stay there for 20 years is just unimaginable.
And to come out a whole human being.
Intact.
Yeah, and
Sanity.
to make the kind of impact that he did, and to eventually become president of the country that had incarcerated him. It is a true testament to the human spirit and what one can achieve.
Well, I think that was the joy when you asked me earlier about Mandela when he met the students. I think that was like a holiday to him. The cheers that for so many years you have been denied the opportunity to touch with people, to hear the laughter, the crowd, the cheers, the touch, and so forth. So again, to him, I feel it was almost like a holiday relived over and over and over and over again. Mhm.
What an extraordinary opportunity you've had to be a witness to all of these historic events. Um, and as we sit here again in the Holocaust Museum, Houston, and we talk about the connections between the Jewish community and the Black community, and just the community at large, and the museum's mission of out of darkness, light, and trying to make sure that the human spirit survives. One of the photographs that you've taken, this one that we're looking at now, of a Jewish cemetery here in Houston. Tell me about this photograph.
Well, I was working under Dr. Freeman at Texas Southern for the Model Cities program, and we had to go out into the community and document the community because the community residents came to TSU on Tuesdays and Thursday night to learn about city services. So on one of my weekends, afternoons, in the Fourth Ward, came down the street, there was the row houses, and I looked over, and there was the cemetery. And I looked, and I began to question why was it there and so forth. And I walked around and walked inside, and I realized it was a Jewish cemetery. And I went back out, and eventually I came around, and the fence created an obstacle for me through the why of how to photograph it, and the juxtaposition of the city and the skyline against the tombstone, to me, just made such a powerful statement that the tombstone, like they was rising, that they took on their own individual personality, that it exemplified and it represented the individuals that was there. It was almost like they was proud that it was there. And it was togetherness with the city and all of that together and how it came together and how it complemented each other. And so I made the picture and I enjoyed the photograph. And I went through and I looked at the tombstones and I photographed from the inside, but from the outside, from a distance, that particular way, it had it's kind of a special meaning and impact.
Absolutely. Very special, very meaningful. And I think, particularly at this moment in history when, we are dealing with so much, not only, of course, the racial unrest, but the pandemic that in the beginning I thought was going to bring us together, and it did for a minute, and then it seemed to further divide us. And I'm hoping that at some point soon there will be that shift once again. Are you out shooting the pandemic and people in the community as they are experiencing this?
Some of it, yes.
What are you feeling and thinking from the photographs that you're taking right now?
Well, I really listen to people talk about they want to get back to normal in their lives. And then what is more normal than to be able to be completely almost free within yourself? You can work from home. You can enjoy your own surroundings. A lot of people don't even enjoy home because they want to leave. But you can stay home. It's peaceful. You got control over what you want to do. And then you're not isolated. Think back at Mandela. 20-some years, one room, one area, no one to talk to. And today we talk about, I want to get back to normal, to be able to get out and to enjoy myself. Your family, enjoy your spouse, enjoy your surroundings. And this is what I try to do, and my photography hopefully reflects that even during the pandemic in such a way. I've thought about how to photograph the mask. I've thought about how to photograph the eyes of people, because we connect more with eyes. We look at people from the eyes. We're more sensitive to people. Body language, we use that a lot. And that's the thing, that I can look at a person and I see them from a distance, from the back or whatever, and I know the face of the person. I may not know the name, but I've seen them before. And so all of that is so important. But learning to enjoy ourselves, I think, is one of the greatest rewards that we can get from the pandemic. How, as a community, we begin to interact with family, with the family, within the community, your close neighbors, and so forth and on. And that is the thing that we have to learn to make those adjustments. And it's not hard. It's just, it's just a matter of how we survive from the standpoint of view, from an economic standpoint of view. But then again, I was always taught back home, make do with what you got. Mm-hmm.
Well, that's certainly what Mr. Mandela did
Yeah.
for all of those years, and I love how you brought that full circle. You know, we become so caught up with what we want, and we want to get back to normal, but so much of it is learning from what his experience was, and he found a way to be free in that jail cell.
Of course.
Yeah.
And this is what we have to do within ourselves, free within ourselves, in our thoughts, our actions from day to day. This is what is important.
If there were any one thing that you'd want to leave our audience with from your perspective as the brilliant photographer and humanitarian that you are, what would that be?
Well, all that I can say is my photographs is mere archetypes of my childhood. It's up to the viewer to come to his own conclusion based upon his personal experiences. In my first art seminar, we was taught art is life. One must draw upon his personal experiences, family, community, and the things that you endured as you grew up. And hopefully, when a person look at my photograph, they find something that they can identify with. The universality of the human spirit is what I seek to capture.
Thank you so much. You're such an inspiration, and it has been such an honor for me to have this conversation with you and share it with our audience. Earlie Hudnall Jr., thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. We look forward to seeing you soon at the museum. And please come to the museum to see our exhibition, Mandela, Struggle for Freedom, which will be open through January 3rd, 2021. Good evening and good night.